welcome to Oakville Matters. We're going to talk about the new community safety and well-being plan for Halton region, so that we can better understand why we're doing it and what we're going to achieve with it. But also, I think it'd be fun to talk about where the idea came from, and it has a really interesting element in the evolution of policing in Canada. So today, to delve into this topic, we're joined by Dave Tutte, who's a sergeant in the Halton Regional Police, and he's in charge of the Community Mobilization Bureau. More about that in a moment. We also have Brent Kalinowski. He's a partner with the Global Network for Community Safety, and he's a bit of a pioneer in this field. And Alex Sarchuk, who's the Commissioner of Health and Social Services at the region of Halton. And with that, I don't know whether to dive in at the back or at the front. Let's go to the front. Alex, just for the viewers at home, summarize what we're about to do rather than what's ahead of us.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Halton has many positive attributes. It's a safe community. It's quite a healthy community, but there are a number of individuals who face challenges and disadvantages in our community, and community safety and well-being is really an effort of key government and non-governmental organizations coming together to plan better and to work better together to address the needs of some of the more disadvantaged members of our community. Some of the issues that citizens face, whether it's mental health services, homelessness, effects of poverty, a risk of criminality or victimization, are multifaceted, and a single organization can be challenged to respond to it. So community safety and well-being planning is an opportunity to bring key partners together to plan more effectively and to deliver services to citizens more effectively.
I can tell you that when Regional Council heard of the opportunity to be a pioneer in this area, because we're one of the very first, and in my opinion, the best community safety and well-being plan so far. The council was unanimous in supporting this, and it was exactly like Gord Downey said: if we want to be a country, we have to look after everybody. We can't let people fall. And now is a good point to jump back in time to you, Brent, because when I first heard about the roots, what turned into this was quite a few years ago when a colleague of yours, Dale McPhee, was speaking to a conference of mayors and councillors, and he was describing what you guys had done to try to deal with the roots of crime.
Yeah, and good morning. Thank you. And it did. It's a number of years back now. Dale was my chief at the time. Back then I was in policing in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And over the last final years of my career was starting to experience some extreme frustration. And when Dale and I and others sat down to talk about what that frustration was, and because despite our best efforts, we were still seeing crime rise, and we didn't see problems getting solved. So deeper dive into that, it discovered that our frustrations weren't, not despite our best efforts, that we were missing some partners in some of the issues we were trying to deal with. Criminality or enforcement of the laws that we were set out to do wasn't changing the landscape. It wasn't changing somebody's addictions or somebody's unemployment or the disadvantaged or those that are marginalized. So it keyed us into the idea that we needed more partners to participate in our community safety for the city of Prince Albert.
Yeah, I remember one session that Chief McPhee gave to the mayors and councillors at the conference I was at, where he said, look, there are some people that belong in jail, and there are others who do not belong there, and all that will happen if we put them there is they'll be in the wrong school and learning the wrong lessons. And at another, I guess about 3 years ago, there was a national conference in Ottawa on community security and the costs of policing, but not just the costs, the need to beef up security. And there were chairs of police and chiefs of police from all over the country. And the most amazing thing for me was listening to all of these tough, long experienced police chiefs saying, we have got to also go upstream and figure out what's sending all this stuff downstream into our hands.
That's it exactly. And that was the realization that we can't do it alone. We have one lever, or had one lever at the time to pull, and that was enforcement. And that wasn't fixing somebody's addictions or the other causes of crime. Realizing that criminality doesn't operate in isolation, what are the other things that are affecting those crimes? So for that reason, we brought in some of our partners to start going further upstream and look at some of those issues. What are the marginalization issues, somebody's addictions, and have those treated instead of trying to treat it with a justice lens alone.
Now, when you started that, did you call that kind of meeting a situation table, or did that term evolve later elsewhere?
It evolved when the model expanded and moved to Ontario. We initially called it a hub. A meeting of all the partners and all the stakeholders to discuss situations of acutely elevated risk and who is at risk in the community and how can we help. When it evolved further east, there were already hubs existing of a different variety. So for that reason, we characterize it now as a situation table broadly.
Thought we changed the name only because we could never, for ego reasons, call, when we steal something from somebody, we don't want to call it the same thing that they did.
Well, there might be a little bit of that too, but broadly, situation table, and it in fact, it even better describes what it actually is. It's a group of stakeholders talking about situations.
And when you invited people to the first hub meeting, what was the reaction? I don't wanna, or oh boy? I mean, what was, how did it?
If you can imagine, it was very interesting. So we invited all of our partners, and most of the management was involved and supported it, but they sent their human service providers at the ground to sit around this table, and we're going to have conversations about situations of acute risk. We were ready to have those conversations, but as you can imagine, in those early days, many of our partners were not, with privacy issues and implications, and just historically, we didn't talk about those things, so it was very quiet to start out with. So when we presented our very first situation and started to engage some of our partners, and there was immediate success surrounding that in making some connections for an individual, it was just demonstrated that this needs to happen, and this is how it can happen, and let's refine it and continue to work on the process as to what it is today, and it evolved as it has.
Well, the way I heard the story, it spread like wildfire in Saskatchewan, and it wasn't long after that here in Ontario, police forces started stealing from it. Dave, when we did our pilot in Halton, what was the initial reaction when we started hitting on these other agencies and saying, you got to come to the table?
The buy-in in our community, fortunately for us, and speaking on behalf of the police, but equally responsible for moving this the situation table forward, is the Halton region. Sometimes people look at it as a police-led initiative, but the situation table is really a collaborative. And when we first reached out to a lot of those health service providers, people were excited about being involved. They were enthusiastic. You have different agencies who are all kind of dealing with the similar situations. So to come together, people were excited about the thought of a team dealing with these situations as opposed to one-offs.
Yeah, there were a lot of different reasons advanced at first for this concept. One of them was to save money, but another one, which I think is the reason to do it that prevails, was voiced. I first heard it voiced by Dale McPhee when by that time he'd become Deputy Minister of I don't know what you call it in Saskatchewan. Policing and Corrections. And he said at another conference, this isn't about saving money, this is about saving lives. And you can't put a dollar figure on saving a life. And then when the Ontario government decided that there was a lot more opportunity here than just situation tables, and I think I'm right to say that the concept of a community and safety and well-being plan evolved from the initial signs of success in the various police forces around Ontario that were piloting situation tables, right?
It has progressed here in Ontario, yes.
And you and your partner, Norm Taylor, I think you had some kind of influence on the Ontario government around this. Can you speak to that?
Not specifically to the influence to the government, although they were part of a lot of our conversations when we talked about the risk tracking database, and were very involved with the Ministry of Community Safety on the premise of advancing this type of work. I think very early on they saw it as a win and something for communities to benefit from. For that reason, a lot of proceeds of crime grants were awarded to communities wanting to push forward these initiatives and models that not only, as you said, not only demonstrated some efficiencies in human services, but collectively supported more folks of marginalized nature, and then those are at risk a lot sooner than they would have been before. They just saw it as an easy win. So on the success of that, wanted to enhance that further to get agencies collaborating more at a broader level, and hence the community safety well-being planning that is going on in a lot of communities, and yours of which is the first, and the Safer Ontario Act.
Yeah, we jumped on this must be almost 2 years ago. There was a conference in Niagara of police boards, and somebody from the Ontario Ministry, one of the ADMs, said, we're thinking we might do this. I came back and said to the chair, Gary Carr, of the region, and the CAO, this could be a problem or an opportunity. Why don't we turn it into an opportunity? After all, we've had various reports from Alex's department that we've got the greatest health in the province, the lowest level of disease. We've got maybe the longest lived, the greatest longevity in the province. We pride ourselves on being the safest regional municipality in the country, according to StatsCan, for quite a few years now. And so what do? Do you sit back and be satisfied, or you try to make it better? And Gary and Jane, the CAO, said, well, of course we try to make it better. And here we are, 2 years of work later. And I was really impressed with the public consultation panels that we did around the region. People from all the different helping agencies came, and they did a really good job of looking interested to me, or even excited. And have you, as we're turning now to action from having built the plan, are you finding that enthusiasm to still be there, Alex?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. So as you alluded to, we did have a fairly broadly based public consultation last spring and summer. Number of public meetings in each of the communities in the region, an online means for people to contribute their ideas. And I think we heard loud and clear that citizens and people, as you said, in the helping community are looking for government and key institutional partners to work more effectively together. The problems that individuals face are multifaceted and complex, and the response by agencies and government needs to be similarly sophisticated. So that consultation yielded, I'd say, excellent support for our model, a recognition that we needed to work more effectively together. And as well, the consultation also identified some priority areas of action. So when we were out talking to people, we asked, well, what are the issues in your community that you believe would benefit from police services, from health and hospitals, from social services coming together and working better together? And they said they were quite concise and I'd say consistent in the issues that they identified. Availability of mental health services and addiction services, issues of social isolation for older adults, homelessness and prevention of homelessness, supporting victims of sexual assault. So we have a very compelling list of social issues that will be a focus of attention through our model in 2018 and beyond. And I have to say there's senior executive leaders from, as I said, hospitals, local health integration authorities, school boards, towns and city of Burlington, as well as the region, coming together to explore those issues, tackle those issues, and try to respond in a more effective way.
Well, I can tell you as a community leader that this is a community that really wants us who work in government to be coordinated, to be efficient, and above all, to be effective. And people who are interested in this can find this plan on the region's website, halton.ca. I believe you can search for it as just CSWB and even get the hit. And or you can type the whole thing out, but either way you're going to get here. And it's it's a marvelous document. It's easy to read, and one of the things that I think is kind of telling is in the document you'll see a list of the risk factors, some of which Alex just identified. And it's certainly true that we are I said the other day that Oakville and the rest of Halton, we are a fully featured community. You know, if you have to look past the reputation and the averages, we have people from all walks of life. There's room for everybody in Oakville and in Halton, and we look after everybody. We do not cater to just one segment, and this is kind of a good list of. This gives you a quick hit of what people were feeding back to us about the top issues, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and if I could chime in, Mr. Mayor, I think even noting there 920 admissions into the shelter system in Halton region, 2016 data, that might be a number that surprises some residents, that there's that number of people in a highly desperate housing situation requiring emergency shelter support. So clearly we have work to do.
Yeah, one of my goals with this was we at Halton, the regional municipality has a Halton Community Investment Fund, and it's I think more than $2 million. The United Way makes grants to helping agencies of a similar, or possibly, it's not the same, but it's roughly that same order of magnitude. We have community foundations now, not only in Oakville, but in other parts of Halton. The Trillium Foundation makes grants. All of this money goes into different efforts. This plan, I hope, will allow us to coordinate all of that so that it can be more effective, get more bang for the buck, if you will. Brent, what kind of hazards and obstacles do you foresee for us ahead down the road we've embarked on?
Just the steady leadership, and we certainly haven't seen a lack of any of that to date, but we have across the country and in some of the other communities that we've assisted and supported. That's a vital component, is that continued leadership and relentless incrementalization of this sort of work and this plan. It's a constant change, and it's fluid. And as you said, we're good here in Halton, but how can we be better, and enhancing that and continuing that throughout the process and for time to come. You can't relax when you're talking about innovation and change management. It has to be steady and pulled from the front.
So, translation, it's not a good plan if it sits on a shelf. You have to work the plan.
It sits on a shelf, and if there's nobody leading it, because we tend to fall back to what we were doing yesterday, and some of those performances weren't that effective. So it's changing every day.
So Dave, how do you think this will change the work that the mobilization operation at the police does? Is this going to expand you, help you? What are the tangible benefits to you?
I think for the Halton Police, we've already added one staffing position for a full-time community safety and well-being officer who is dedicated solely to working at this plan and putting it into action, and really working closely with partners with Alex's team in the region side to drive the 7 priorities which we've identified, to drive that work forward, and then to continue to identify other issues in our community that we can work at coming up with solutions for, whether it's going through the Halton Region Community Investment Fund or creating an action table, or just being more aware of those issues and refocusing resources.
So you know the expression, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that what this does is give us more tools so that we respond. I mean, I was very, very amazed when I learned that 80% of the calls to 911 aren't crime. There are other kinds of calls for help. And is this going to help us send a different response when it's appropriate?
Absolutely. And when I come back to community safety and well-being planning, or we're looking at an upstream plan for intervention, it's not about saving dollars and cents. It's about really as a community, the police partnering with other agencies to deliver the best program. From a mental health aspect, we have our mobile crisis rapid response team, and that team is only as effective as it is because of the partnerships that they have. Responding with a mental health worker, a social worker, or a nurse to provide that care for the best care for that person who's going through a crisis. One of the stats that we identified was 3,100 calls for service, mental health related calls for service in 2016. In 2017, that number is slightly up. And as a service, when we're partnering with other agencies, we're not looking at decreasing those amount of calls. We're looking at providing the best care and supports for those people who are going through those mental health crises. And we couldn't do that if we weren't partnering with other agencies.
Is mental health the biggest problem in Halton? Anybody? Alex? Dave?
I think it's fair to say that we heard through our consultation from a variety of social agencies, members of the community, that it is that the availability of service, the appropriateness of service continue to be issues. These are multiple levels of government that need to be able to respond to that. Certainly the provincial government from a healthcare perspective has an important primary responsibility to fund that system. But within the region, as we've alluded to, there are opportunities to increase the efficacy of services through better service coordination, case coordination, and again, the plan speaks to that in some detail, and that will be an area of attention and hopefully improvement in 2018, 2019, and beyond.
Now, because the province was the origin of the suggestion, and they've now embodied it in their legislation, they haven't passed it, but it's in the proposed new Police Service Act that it's interesting. The Police Services Act says that municipalities need to do community safety and well-being plans. Now, I'm not complaining about that. I actually wanted it to come out that way. It started out as police boards had to do it, but we all agreed at the region of Halton that it made far more sense for the regional municipality to do it. And one of my hopes is that we can use their required plan to get them to be more effective and more responsive. Are we expecting that? And because we work with them all the time, how are they responding to this?
Yeah, certainly a number of the upstream interventions that Sergeant Tutte alluded to, whether we're providing income supports, whether we're providing child care supports, housing supports, homelessness prevention, these are generally provincially funded programs, mandated programs through legislation that municipalities like Halton Region deliver. So as we describe and understand the demand for these services and how these services could be delivered more effectively, certainly I think there's an advocacy opportunity with our provincial colleagues to clarify how we can be more effective with appropriate investment in these programs. And it may not be more investment, it may be
how about better?
Better. Restructured, rethinking some of the program guidelines, and to some degree the restrictions that are placed on us as deliverers of services to be creative and dynamic in the way that we achieve value for taxpayers and solve some of these social problems.
Yeah, I'm the chair of the police board, and at the police board we've seen more shifting and refocusing of provincial grants to policing than we've seen over in Health and Social Services, where I chair the standing committee. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying that I hope to see more flexibility and responsiveness from the agencies that we deal with on your side of the building. And so any signs of I mean, what you hope for when the province says you ought to have these things is they line up behind the thing they said that you have to have. And
we live in hope.
That's right. The record isn't always perfect on that score. But I will say that the last 2 years, the province has been way more responsive than I experienced in the previous 10. So there you go. There's a bouquet for the province that I'm not normally the one to hand out bouquets. they'll probably overuse that now.
Well, I think there's and in the development of the Safer Ontario Act and the community safety wellbeing plans, there's an understanding that there's a real opportunity here for more communication and an identification of what those specific issues are in each of the regions within Ontario. It's not a blanket anymore. So I think there's a real opportunity, and that the provincial government has seen that they can start to see what the unique care needs to be in each of the communities in Ontario. And so that conversation is going to be open on how they can address those specifically from one community to another.
Now, we've got a minute or so left, and I've been struck by how many police forces have contacted us for information about how to follow the path that we're on. How about at the regional municipal level? There's 5 other regional municipalities that I can think of, and other municipalities besides, 440 more. Are they coming to you for?
Absolutely.
How's that?
Absolutely. There's significant interest in this, certainly with the impending passage of the Safer Ontario Act and the requirement that municipalities undertake this type of planning. Lots of attention on the work that we've done, lots of opportunities for us to describe our process to my peer community. I believe later this month, Jane McCaskill, the CEO of Halton Region, and myself will be speaking to her peer group of regional CAOs from around the province to share our experience and some of our best practices. I think we've come at this in a thoughtful way with our key partners, first and foremost, Halton Regional Police Services, and we have a good model. Models will look a little bit different in each community. Communities have certainly unique characteristics, but I think the bones of our model should make sense for a lot of other jurisdictions.
Well, thank you guys for the conversation today. I know that all across Halton, we have basically 4 local municipalities full of people who have to be leaders in their own lives, and they expect us to lead. And the fact is, I think we may be succeeding on this front, at being at the forefront, and stay tuned for more results. It's been great seeing you on Oakville Matters, and hope we see you again soon. We made it.